What exactly was the reason for the CIA director's urgent trip to Moscow? Furthermore, the CCP cyber army, GZhen, successfully breached 17 major US departments. Also, regarding the mudslide in Nepal that left hundreds of casualties, it has raised two major questions. Oh, and today, Feng Wei will also be making a major announcement for the channel, so make sure you watch until the end of the channel so you can find out exactly what today's major announcement is. All right, welcome to Good Morning America, brought to you by Feng Wei. Hello to our YouTube viewers, and hello to our listeners of Sound of Hope FM 96.1. All right, let's get down to business. First of all, why did the CIA director suddenly visit Russia? Everyone is still guessing. So this is about Ratcliffe suddenly going to Moscow the day before yesterday. First, what are the directions of these speculations? One possibility is that Ratcliffe went to Russia to demand that Russia stop providing weapons and defense technology to Tehran, and to warn the Russian side that if the US expands sanctions and hits Russia, they shouldn't overreact. Of course, this sounds reasonable and logical. It's possible that this is the case. Additionally, Bloomberg News reported that Russia's preparing to intensify its strikes on Ukraine and has also threatened that it might start targeting British military assets. They also mentioned that Russia might use tactical nuclear weapons, which is a completely different kind of speculation. All right, so thirdly, the third point is the main topic today. The Wall Street Journal and Politico both cited anonymous sources in their reports. What does this mean? It means that the two of them did it independently, and the results they came up with are the same. It says that the main purpose of Ratcliffe's trip was to warn Russia not to take escalatory actions against NATO countries. And Politico, that's the political magazine, the political website, its version is more specific. It says, what was the main purpose of Ratcliffe going to meet with the Russians? It was to warn Russia, not to take any military action against the three Baltic states. It specifically named Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, which are, the former Soviet satellite republics that became independent after the collapse of the Soviet Union. And furthermore, the Wall Street Journal, its report corresponds to its August 7th report. On August 7th, we were talking about a report from 20 days ago. That report stated that the US had an intelligence assessment they obtained, and the conclusion of this assessment was that Putin might launch a limited attack on NATO member states to test the collective defense resolve of the NATO alliance. NATO has something called Article 5, right? Article 5 states that an attack on any one country is treated as an attack on the entire NATO alliance. Now, that sounds like a great resolve, of course, but the key is, can you actually carry it out? If any small country were really attacked, would the whole of NATO jump in to fight? Do you have that kind of resolve? So it's an attempt to divide NATO, and this time window is stretched out so long. The intelligence report from August 7th says it could start as early as this autumn, or as late as 2029. 2029? Can Putin even hold out until then? Anyway, regardless, previously, the US side believed this intelligence said, we originally thought Russia was bogged down by the war in Ukraine and didn't have the strength to divert troops or attention to threaten NATO. And that assumption has already been revised. The reason is because of this, three aspects. One is Ukraine's strikes on Russia's energy facilities, which have been effective, and Russia has no way to respond. Second, Russia's progress on the battlefield has been limited, specifically referring to the battlefield in eastern Ukraine. As a result, it has prompted Putin to turn to seeking some kind of victory against NATO to turn the situation around. And third, it's actually a need for Putin to stabilize his own power domestically. If there isn't some kind of victory, it will be very difficult for him to continue on from here. So therefore, that's why there is such an assessment, or such a reaction. Now the key is how the US and Russian officials explain this matter, since 2 days have already passed. The director of Russia's Foreign Intelligence Service came out and said, yes, there was a meeting, they did meet, but it was nothing special. He said it was nothing special. Standard working procedure. He said that he meets with foreign intelligence chiefs almost every week. So what's the big deal about Ratcliffe coming here? Clearly, they are downplaying this matter. As for the U.S. stance, Trump said on Glenn Beck's radio show yesterday that this matter was a semi-routine affair, and explicitly denied that it had anything to do with NATO or concerns about Iran. He said that there might be some results coming out of it. We are working very hard to end the Russia-Ukraine war. So both sides are handling this matter in a very low-key way. So is there actually something going on? What do you think? I'd say some's going on. Why? I have three reasons. One is that they are downplaying it. They are downplaying it too much, which is what you call deliberate downplaying. There's a saying, the dog that bites doesn't bark, and the dog that barks doesn't bite. China is always conducting military exercises around Taiwan, doing this and that, but in reality, they have no intention of actually attacking. If you were really going to attack, you would start gathering your forces quietly. So both sides are downplaying it, deliberately downplaying this matter. And when they insist it's nothing, that's actually when there is something going on. That's the first point. The second point, this is my analysis, the second point is that not only do they not admit it, but this time the CIA director went to Russia without even notifying the EU, so the EU has been very unhappy these past 2 days. Why is that? Because the CIA director went to Russia without telling the EU, but he did tell Ukraine. Of course, it makes sense that he told Ukraine and didn't tell the EU, right? Because both sides are at war, you know? What he meant by telling the Ukraine was don't just go around firing missiles or drones during those 2 days. Don't shoot down our CIA director. But the whole thing was discovered by CBS. CBS is the Columbia Broadcasting System, you know? How did they discover it? One way was by monitoring flight data, where they saw a U.S. Army transport plane, a U.S. military transport plane, take off from Andrews Air Force Base in Maryland, and fly to Moscow. That was very eye-catching for sure, because it's not like the U.S. and Russia have flights like that all the time. So this is a scenario that would be almost impossible during the Russia-Ukraine war, which is why they followed it to see what was going on. Secondly, they saw a U.S. diplomatic convoy on the streets of Moscow driving by with the American flag displayed. So by connecting these two things, they were able to uncover the whole story. Therefore, this visit was originally supposed to be a top-secret matter. If there was nothing going on, would you need it to be top secret? Why not just make it public and be done with it? You didn't make it public and then you got caught. That's the second reason. Thirdly, there are these details that don't align with the claim that nothing happened. Chris, after Ratcliffe returned to the U.S., he immediately held a 3-hour closed-door meeting with Trump, Secretary of Defense Hegseth, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff Kane, and senior national security officials. Therefore, this kind of routine intelligence contact wouldn't have a follow-up of this caliber. We're talking about the Defense Secretary, the Joint Chiefs Chairman, and the President holding a 3-hour meeting. When both sides downplay it, insisting it's nothing, you know something is up. So what is this really about? And what are people saying? Today, I, Fang Wei, don't have an answer for you. I can only share the relevant information with you. Now, the massive flooding and mudslides that occurred on August 26th on the border between Nepal and Tibet are truly, truly terrifying. The internet is already flooded with it. The flood came with such ferocity, washing away this village, along with 19 bridges and many roads and infrastructure. The scene is truly chilling. It's really, really terrifying. But because of YouTube, I can't describe it too vividly or I'll get yellow flagged. But as everyone has seen, the official announcement regarding the flood, the official death toll from the flood in Nepal, as of now has risen to 359. Among them, 65 are from the United States, 33 from the UK, and 178 from India. Why are there so many Westerners there? The reason is that this is the place for climbing the peak of the Himalayas. So there are many Western mountaineers. In addition, the number of missing tourists is now 644, involving people from more than 30 countries. And there are also dozens of local police officers who have lost contact. Meanwhile, Chinese media reported that the death toll in Tibet is 3, and the number of missing persons is 558. Okay, multiple areas in Nepal near the Tibetan border have suffered severe damage, this trauma. Currently, large-scale search and rescue operations are underway across Nepal. The National Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Authority of Nepal stated that 9,300 police officers have been deployed. Nepal is a tiny little country, so 9,300 police officers is basically the entire force mobilized. 9,300 police officers, military personnel, and armed police forces are participating in the search and rescue operations. And India was also affected by this. The Indian Ministry of External Affairs stated that the floods in Nepal and Tibet have left 288 Indian citizens missing, and another 200 Indian citizens are trapped in Tibet, currently seeking evacuation. Now, there are two mysteries here. One is the huge discrepancy in the death tolls between the two countries. Nepal reports 359 deaths, and relatively, 644 people are dead or, well, missing. The ratio of deaths to missing persons is 56%. Whereas the CCP side reports that in Tibet there are 3 deaths and 558 missing, with a death toll accounting for 0.5% of the number of missing persons. So one is 56% and the other is 0.5%. It's the same disaster right on adjacent sides on either side of a river. It's a border river after all, yet the statistics are completely different. Why exactly is that? Is it because the rescue stages are different? Are the criteria for determination different? Or is the standard for reporting different? So what are everyone's thoughts? Let me ask for everyone's opinions. What do you think? Another big mystery is, and we can also look at this from a perspective of concern, many of our viewers have connections there or have friends of friends there. So if you have any information regarding the death toll of this disaster, please post it in the comment section under Feng Wei's post, okay? Let's work together to understand the situation on the front lines, the real situation, because it's really impossible to get accurate numbers from the CCP. So it's truly very regrettable, this kind of matter involving human lives. Alright, so the second major mystery is what exactly happened? I previously reported to everyone, I reported a day before yesterday, then I said there was an earthquake, but the USGS just stated that there was no earthquake. And what's being discussed the most about this flood right now is that it happened suddenly in broad daylight without any rain. In just a few seconds, a massive flash flood swept through everything in the vicinity, and villages were completely wiped out. One of the worst disasters in human history just unfolded like that, and it seems like there's no reason for it. Why on earth did this happen? So the US Geological Survey stated that based on further analysis of nearby seismic stations, long-period seismic waves, and satellite imagery, this event was actually a glacier collapse and a mudslide, not an earthquake. So the big question now is, why exactly did this happen? Well, we'll just have to wait and see. I, Feng Wei, will continue to follow this news to see what the final outcome is. Is it really a natural disaster? Or is there some other reason? Alright, if any of our viewers have relevant information on this, please feel free to share it, okay? Now, the third point is something that has really shaken the United States. CCP hackers attacking the US. The US has urgently seized the domain names for this network. You might say, CCP hackers attacking the US happens all the time, what's new? Why treat it as such a big deal? It really is a big deal. This news broke yesterday, but it's huge. It really can be said to have shocked the US government and both parties in the US. What's going on? The CCP's latest hacking operation breached what are called the U.S. National Aeronautics and Space Administration, the Federal Reserve, the Department of Justice, the U.S. Department of Energy, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, the National Institutes of Health, and the U.S. Senate. So these 7 major agencies, the Department of Justice has now seized the relevant domains through court authorization to cut off the tools used by these hackers. So what exactly is going on with this? This hacking group, its online name is QTFY. It's a CCP-funded hacking group, but it's based inside a private company called Nanjing Xingjue Network Technology Company Limited. This approach has been the typical method used by the CCP in recent years, because the PLA and the Ministry of State Security don't directly do the hacking themselves. They outsource it to private companies so that if something goes wrong, they can wash their hands of it. We all know that this fentanyl issue was originally produced by CCP chemical plants, and it is a systematic opium war targeting the United States. However, the CCP only produces the precursors. After completing 90% of the process, they leave the remaining 10% and then ship this fentanyl to Mexico or Colombia, letting them finish the final 10%. How's the final 10% done? The CCP specifically sends experts to teach them how to do it. So when they get caught by the US, the CCP just says, I didn't do it. I only supplied the raw materials. Who knows why they wanted to buy our raw materials? As for the missiles given to Iran, they don't supply the whole complete missile, they supply the fuel, or what they call chemical raw materials. Then, when they get caught by the US, they just say, what does a private company doing business have to do with me? As for the long haul, over the past 4 years of supporting Russia's weapon systems, providing chips, providing parts, they didn't directly give Russia weapons. Maybe they didn't give them directly, or maybe they didn't give them in large quantities, but what they did provide were things that could be turned into weapons in a heartbeat. The whole point of this is to shirk responsibility, what they call deniability in English. When something goes wrong, they say, it has nothing to do with me, even though everyone knows it's your doing. But as for hacking into 7 major US government departments, is that really something a private Chinese company would dare to do? We all know, anyone from China knows, that it was 100% the CCP that did it. What kind of private company would dare to do something like this? All right, so this so-called Xinjiwei Network Technology Company Limited started doing this in 2018. It mainly developed a bunch of tools, two of which are the most prominent, one called QScan and the other called QT Router. QScan? Well, it incessantly scans the world, mainly the West and the United States, for vulnerabilities in all network devices, and then aggregates them into a database, compiling them into a network that can be attacked, a target network that can be compromised. So that's one thing. Secondly, if they want to launch an attack, this so-called Xinjiwei provides over 200 attack programs while simultaneously providing cover for the attacks. When launching an attack, they flood it with legitimate traffic at the same time. The victim can't tell, they can't figure out who exactly is attacking, because both legitimate and illegitimate traffic are all flooding in. So they create these two tools, and once they're done, they provide them to the CCP-affiliated hacker personnel from the central level down to the provinces to use. It's basically a general logistics department supporting CCP hackers. The frontline troops are the hackers on the front lines who are carrying out the attacks, and the rearguard logistical support is provided by this company called Xinjiwei. So it really has, over the past few years, infiltrated what you'd call critical infrastructure and multiple sensitive networks in the US and around the world. Everyone should know that what this Xinjiwei has done isn't the first time. In the past 3 years, there have been two other major massive attacks. One was in 2023 called Volt Typhoon. It infiltrated numerous pieces of US infrastructure, lying in wait there, ready to act, so that when a war breaks out in the future, it can suddenly strike and paralyze US infrastructure. The second one was in 2025, everyone remembers it, called Sol Typhoon. It invaded US communication equipment, lurking in that equipment for a long time to listen in on US conversations. These are things that shake the very foundation of the nation, attacks that shake the foundation of the United States. This isn't just some small-time stuff like stealing a bit of data to make some money. This is a full-blown state action, a military operation. Then the third one is this year, just happened in 2026. This time it's the upstream system, which is equivalent to creating all kinds of tools, powerful tools, for the various factions under the CCP to use. So it's equivalent to the rear base or logistics headquarters for the CCP cyber army attacking the US network. That's the situation. So what is the US going to do? Well, for one thing, there are two URLs hard-coded into these tools, just written directly into them. So the US just disabled these two URLs, took them down, and blocked them from accessing the internet. So naturally, the tool became unusable. But does this solve the problem? Only temporarily. They can just modify the program, right? Get rid of the hard coding, and wouldn't that fix it, right? It only takes a few days, or at most a few dozen days, for these hacker units to get their hands on an updated program. So the US can't actually solve this problem at the root. They're just setting them back temporarily. So you can see here that China's hacker units really have a division of labor when targeting the US. There's a frontline, logistics, official channels, civilian ones, some to deflect blame, and others to take the fall. This is a very structural thing, set up in such a formation, which is why it's called a Jiajian attack. You're out in the open, and I'm in the shadows. So America, can you really handle that? And how many more of these cyber attacks haven't been caught yet? Right now, we're talking about Volt Typhoon, Salt Typhoon, and the new one mentioned just now. Honestly, nobody knows how many more haven't been caught. So this whole thing has really sent shockwaves through the US. Furthermore, the CCP uses both overt and covert tactics against the US. I just talked about the covert side, but what exactly does covert mean? That's the hackers, right? So what about the overt side? How should we put it? The CCP's AI technology is now brazenly trying to make its way into the US. We all know there's a Chinese company called Moonshot. Translated into Chinese, it's Dark Side of the Moon, or Moonshot AI. It's now looking to storm into the US, trying to get onto the 3 major US cloud platforms to compete with mainstream American AI for customers, competing for users like us. Now, as everyone knows, before we talk about this, let's go back over a month to July 22nd. High-ranking US officials publicly criticized this Chinese company, Moonshot AI, stating that it illegally distilled Anthropic's Claude model to help develop its newly released system, the so-called Kimi K3. Now, we all know that distillation is an AI training method, a training technique. It uses a smaller, simpler model to learn from the outputs generated by a large model, allowing this small model to achieve performance close to that of the large model without needing to invest as much in computational costs. Now, this is generally used for academic research. Which professor is going to spend tens of millions of dollars to build a model just for research? So you can use distillation, it's permitted within the academic scope. However, if a commercial company does this, it violates the terms of use and essentially amounts to intellectual property theft. So as a result, this company called Moonshot under US export controls is not only engaging in illegal distillation, violating the terms of use, but is also illegally distilling the results from these American AI companies. Furthermore, despite being under US export controls, it still managed to get its hands on NVIDIA's most advanced chips, the GB200. Well, that is the platform system from NVIDIA called Blackwell, and obtained servers equipped with these GB200 chips. Or perhaps secured the usage rights in Thailand? We don't know the exact details. Anyway, regardless of how it happened, they are using the most powerful American chips to train their artificial intelligence models. Of course, after this came out, Moonshot AI denied the claim that the K3's performance was derived from distillation. They didn't admit it, they denied it. Currently, Moonshot AI is in negotiations with the three major American cloud platform companies, Microsoft Azure, Amazon AWS, and Google Cloud, to list their latest model on these three platforms, and they are sharing 30% of the revenue. Basically, both sides will make money together, and after the money is made, they will take a 30% cut. This potential partnership has sparked new national security concerns in the United States. Because the question is whether American tech giants should be providing global distribution, computing power, and a share of dollar revenue to a company that is under scrutiny by the US, effectively allowing it to compete directly with American AI companies and steal end users right from under the US's nose. Whether a deal can ultimately be reached is unknown for now, but if it is, this would become the first major revenue-sharing arrangement between a leading Chinese AI company and a large American cloud service provider. So does it have any competitiveness in this? It definitely has competitiveness. First of all, it has to copy so much homework. That's the first thing. Second, it must be super cheap, because when Chinese tech companies compete with American companies, they have the state behind them, state funding, so they are super competitive and definitely super cheap. So what can the US do? Is the US helpless? Treasury Secretary Besson, just last month on X, stated that he is considering adding Moonshot AI to the trade blacklist and imposing sanctions. Because once the US imposes sanctions, it's game over for them. So at the end of the day, the US is the one in charge, right? They can absolutely deal with you if they want to. Alright, next let's talk about something called the US-China, the so-called battle for Africa. What's going on there? As everyone knows, the manufacturing industry that the CCP has propped up with government subsidies, and it's not just AI, not just this high-tech stuff, but also manufacturing in general, is currently destroying Africa's own domestic industries. What's going on where? We all know that China's manufacturing sector now accounts for 35% of global production capacity, so Chinese products are being dumped in massive quantities all over the world. Last year, the trade surplus reached a record high of 1.2 trillion, and the main markets, the ones with the highest profits, are definitely the US and European markets, right? However, they are being blocked by the US, by Trump's tariffs, and Europe is currently considering putting up tariffs as well. So what about other places? This is the latest report coming from Fox, a special report saying that China's exports are severely damaging Africa's economy. Africa's manufacturing sector is taking a heavy hit from the surge in Chinese imports, and they say it's a triple blow. First, Chinese companies are taking raw materials from the African continent at low prices, including key mines. It's a form of resource plundering. Second, they take them to China for processing and then sell them back to Africa as state-subsidized products, crushing local African manufacturing. Third, they don't import an equivalent amount of products from Africa, which creates a huge trade surplus for them and a trade deficit for Africa. So in 2025, China's exports to Africa reached 225 billion US dollars, while imports from Africa were only about half of that at 123 billion US dollars. The CCP is now the largest trading partner for many African countries because European and American companies can't survive in Africa. Under the CCP's so-called price subsidy policy, private companies from Europe and the US simply cannot compete with Chinese companies. A senior director at the Center on Economic and Financial Power at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies in the U.S., whose name is Dresner, said that the success of Chinese companies does not mean that African countries are able to move up the industrial chain or the value chain, which means they are able to do better and better. On the contrary, he said that some African countries are increasingly trapped in a cycle of exporting minerals and other natural resources to the CCP while receiving finished goods from China. He said that as China is increasingly excluded from US and European markets due to high tariff regimes, Africa is bearing the consequences, and in fact, Southeast Asia is also bearing the consequences. And the CCP, meanwhile, still claims that it is supporting emerging economies, basically saying, I am helping you, Africa. So he said that China once lent money to Mozambique to build new roads, bridges, and other infrastructure. However, in this country, which is the fifth poorest in the world, well, not the fifth poorest, but the fifth least wealthy, a country with a shortage of jobs, the CCP insisted that Chinese companies handle the construction. And in many cases, the construction workers were brought in all the way from Beijing, traveling 7,000 miles just to come here and, well, just to dig roads. So the result is that the local people can only stand by and watch. What does that mean? It means it fails to bring jobs to Mozambique. So this has become a common sight in these African countries. The Belt and Road Initiative is like this everywhere. China invests, the CCP invests, and then they export their production capacity and bring in Chinese construction teams. Why? A major reason for the Belt and Road Initiative is that in China, there's no more infrastructure left to build. There's nothing left to construct. So since they have such a massive infrastructure construction force and such great capacity, they just export it. They go to these Belt and Road countries to build things. Of course, this is just to absorb the labor resources that China has no use for, that it can't utilize. But in these places, you're very likely to end up with failed investments. It's not that easy to succeed with investments in these poor regions. The U.S. Assistant Secretary of State for African Affairs, Garcia, said that the CCP continues to flood Africa with exports, leading to unsustainable debt and economic coercion, and that no country can withstand the negative impacts caused by the CCP's unfair trade practices and state-subsidized overcapacity. However, the U.S. is also re-entering Africa now. The U.S. Department of State's Bureau of African Affairs reports that since the beginning of President Trump's second term, they have facilitated 37 completed business deals with a total value of $26 billion, and there are still more deals in the pipeline. He said that the U.S. government wants to provide credible, trustworthy alternatives to protect African countries from the new threats and evolving capabilities that come with foreign investment. But Fox's report says there's still a long way to go because according to data from the U.S. Trade Representative's Office, U.S.-Africa trade in goods last year was $83 billion, while the CCP's trade volume with Africa reached $348 billion. However, he said that the U.S. side's determination to win is very clear. Assistant Secretary of State Garcia said that the U.S. is committed to reshaping the global market for critical minerals and rare earths, making it more diverse, more secure, and more reliable. We will work with our African partners to address the risks posed by non-market actors and ensure supply chain security. We are utilizing diplomatic and economic tools to promote a market that is fair, transparent, and effective for everyone. Anyway, what do I mean by saying all this? The general idea is that the CCP is dumping products on the whole world. If you rush in one by one with such a powerful and highly imbalanced manufacturing sector, the things you produce cannot be afforded by China, by the Chinese people. They're purely made to earn money from foreigners. But there's a prerequisite for this. If you want to make money from foreigners like this, there's a condition. The foreigners have to be willing to let you make that money. Once they put up tariffs and close their borders, you're out of luck. So what happens to that massive manufacturing sector then? This predatory dumping behavior by the CCP is exactly what's driving countries around the world to close their doors to it. So it really is extremely irrational. But regardless, the CCP has never considered creating a win-win situation for others. It's always, I win, you lose. I win, you lose. What's the end result of that? It's just a total breakdown, isn't it? All right, let's take a look at Meta. Meta have to pay $18 billion. What's the reason for that? So Meta has agreed to pay $17.1 billion to settle a lawsuit brought by the state governments of 29 states and to implement restrictions on teenagers' use of accounts like Facebook and IG. What's going on? It's about 29 states suing Meta or Facebook in court, claiming that they use algorithms to get minors addicted, causing physical and mental harm, and that parents can't control it. This kind of practice violates consumer protection laws, as it improperly collects children's personal data without parental consent. Meta and other social media companies are now not only facing these lawsuits from various states, but also thousands of lawsuits related to children's social media addiction. If a settlement wasn't reached yesterday, Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg could be subpoenaed to testify in court. According to the Washington, D.C. Attorney General's office, Meta will pay at least $12.1 billion over the next 10 years. Meta has also called on TikTok and YouTube to adopt similar restrictions to prevent children from becoming addicted to their platforms. They believe that if everyone does this, then teenagers should. Well, they think teenagers often switch between different apps, so it's not enough for just us to do it. You have to do it too. And if other social media companies also agree to do this, Meta is willing to pay an additional $5 billion, essentially to help make this happen.